Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. This is your deep dive daily briefing. I am your anchor, delivering a comprehensive analysis of the pivotal events that have defined the last 24 hours. We begin our broadcast on the world stage, where the strategic landscape of the Middle East remains in a state of extreme volatility. Overnight, President Donald Trump warned that the existing ceasefire in the West Asia conflict is currently on life support. This dire assessment follows the White House's rejection of a recent counteroffer from Tehran, a move that has dashed hopes for a rapid diplomatic breakthrough to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping. As the verbal sparring intensifies, reports have emerged suggesting that Pakistan, acting as a regional mediator, has allowed Iranian military aircraft to park on its airbases to shield them from potential American airstrikes. This development adds a layer of complexity to the mediation efforts and signals that while diplomacy continues, regional actors are increasingly hedging against a full-scale resumption of kinetic operations.
Transitioning from the front lines of diplomacy to the broader global economy, the shadow of war continues to weigh heavily on international growth projections. The International Monetary Fund has solidified its 2026 global growth forecast at 3.1%, a significant reduction from pre-war estimates. IMF chief economist Pierre-Olivier Gourinchas warned that if the conflict remains unresolved and energy prices stay steep, growth could plummet to as low as 2%, a level historically associated with global recessions. The fund highlights that the world is currently grappling with a dual shock: the direct inflationary pressure from surging oil and gas prices, and the structural fiscal strain as nations divert capital toward defense. This shift toward a wartime economic footing is weakening fiscal buffers and threatening to crowd out the productive investments necessary for a sustainable long-term recovery.
In the realm of finance, all eyes are on the United States Senate as it reaches a historic turning point in monetary policy. On Tuesday, the Senate confirmed Kevin Warsh to a 14-year term on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, clearing the primary hurdle for his installation as the next chair of the central bank. Warsh is widely expected to be officially installed as chief before the end of the week, just in time to replace Jerome Powell, whose term concludes this Friday, May 15th. The incoming chair has pledged an ambitious reform agenda, advocating for a regime change in how the Fed communicates and implements policy. Institutional investors are bracing for a more hawkish era under Warsh, who has vowed to maintain the Fed's independence while navigating a global debt pool that now exceeds $315 trillion and an inflationary environment fueled by the ongoing Middle East crisis.
Turning our attention to the technology sector, the focus remains on the massive infrastructure supercycle driven by the critical need for energy-independent artificial intelligence. In a landmark strategic partnership announced recently, Terrestrial Energy and Riot Platforms have signed a memorandum of understanding to explore the deployment of advanced small modular reactors to power hyperscale data centers. This move aims to bypass the physical power ceiling of a volatile global grid by utilizing molten salt reactor technology to provide reliable, carbon-free baseload power. As the electricity demand for AI workloads is projected to be inherently inflationary in the near term, tech giants are increasingly evolving into decentralized energy producers. This vertical integration of compute and power is now viewed as the new frontier of technological leadership, ensuring that the next generation of agentic AI can operate within a secure and self-sustaining digital infrastructure.
Finally, we look at the logistics and supply chain networks that serve as the vital arteries of global commerce, which are now undergoing a permanent structural rewiring. The ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz has essentially forced the maritime industry to finalize its transition to the Cape of Good Hope as the primary route for Asia to Europe trade. Data from maritime intelligence firms indicate that while the temporary ceasefire provided a brief pause, the rejection of the latest peace terms has solidified the detour as a semi-permanent baseline for world trade. This shift adds roughly 14 days to standard transit times and has absorbed a significant portion of the global fleet's total capacity. Logistics professionals warn that the world has moved toward a fractured trade model, where regional inventory buffers and security of supply are now prioritized over cost optimization, leading to a sustained period of higher consumer prices.
In summary, the global landscape is defined by a fragile Middle Eastern ceasefire on the brink of collapse, a significant downgrade in global growth projections, and a historic leadership transition at the Federal Reserve. Technological innovation is pivoting toward energy independence to bypass a volatile grid, while the logistics industry has accepted a permanent, high-cost rerouting of world trade. Based on the current trajectory, I predict that the official installation of Kevin Warsh as Fed chair this Friday will serve as a definitive signal to the markets that the era of central bank accommodation is over. Even if a last-minute diplomatic breakthrough occurs in the Middle East, the structural inflation baked into the new regionalized logistics model and the massive capital redirection toward energy-independent AI infrastructure will prevent a return to the low-interest rate environment of the previous decade. We are entering a long-term cycle where resilience and national security will consistently outweigh the efficiencies of the old globalized order.